Marco added a filter to his inbox this morning, and the thing it filters out is the reviewer we built. It ran on his payments pull request overnight and left 19 comments, and only 3 of them were real. The other 16 were style opinions, plus a warning about a pattern this repo uses everywhere on purpose. The security bug it did find sits at comment 14 of 19, where nobody will ever read it. A reviewer that's right sometimes and loud all the time is worse than no reviewer at all. Freeze on that one comment, because the exam is built out of moments exactly like this one. The question sounds simple. What do you change? So the 3 real findings become the ones people actually read. And hold your first instinct, because the fix here isn't a stronger instruction. The reviewer runs by itself on every pull request now, but it can't stay quiet about what doesn't matter, and that one failure cancels the rest. This is domain for prompt engineering and structured output, a fifth of the whole exam, call it roughly 12 of the 60 questions you'll sit. The guide even wrote this story down as one of its scenarios, prompts that give actionable feedback and minimize false positives. The weight makes sense because the documented way to change how the model behaves is the prompt itself, not a knob on the request. The architect question parked in the corner all episode is, how is the intent carried? Before touching a word of that prompt, you need to see why 3 real findings still lost the room. Start with the score. 3 real problems out of 19 comments isn't a terrible hit rate for a first version. The team stopped reading anyway. The guide explains it in one knowledge bullet. A category with a high false positive rate undermines confidence in the categories that are accurate. So the noisy style check took the security findings down with it. Marco's filter doesn't care which category was the honest one, which unlocks a move the guide lists as a skill you are tested on. Turn your worst category off on purpose and leave it off while you rewrite the prompt behind it. So style goes dark, trust starts to recover, and now somebody has to open their prompt and find out why it shouts. Here is the prompt, and the cause is written into it in plain sight on the very first line. It reads in capitals, Seattle, you must report every possible issue you find. Read that as a person, and it sounds responsible, but read it as an instruction, and it's an order to never stay quiet. Now the twist, because nobody wrote that line to be careless. An earlier generation of models underreported, and back then it honestly took hard language to make them speak up. Current guidance says exactly that kind of wording now over triggers, so the cure for the old failure is causing the new one. Same idea as a principle, a prompt tuned around one generation's weakness quietly becomes the next generation's bug. And the documented fix looks like doing nothing, the capitals come out, the thread comes out, and a plain description of the job stays. Report bugs and security issues, that's the entire replacement. The rest of the block gets the same treatment, say what you want done, instead of listing everything you don't. A quieter sentence feels wrong at first, and it felt wrong to Marco's team, so their next patch adds more words. The added words are the 2 lines everyone reaches for: be conservative and only report high confidence findings. The guide names both of those lines and says plainly that they fail to improve precision. Both lines ask the model to grade its own certainty, then filter its own output on that grade. The model sounds equally certain either way, whether it's wrong about a naming convention or right about a real bug. What works is changing the instruction, not the volume, and the guide's own example is 2 versions of one line. Version 1 says, check that comments are accurate, which sounds fine, but leaves the model to decide what accurate means. Version 2 says, flag a comment only when the behavior it claims contradicts what the code does. The second one is testable. You and the model agreed in advance on what counts as a finding, and the guide wants the rulebook built that way. Now build the rulebook, and Objective 4.1 gives it a shape you can draw. 2 lists, not a threshold. On the report list go bugs and security problems, and on the skip list go minor style points and patterns local to this codebase. That second entry is Marco's pull request. a pattern flagged as wrong for being unusual in the repo where it's house style, a local convention isn't a defect, and a written skip rule just worked that out where no confidence threshold ever could. Severity gets the same treatment, a concrete code example pinned to every level, an actual snippet, not a definition, so classification stops being a judgment call. One more sentence per rule, say why it exists, because the reason improves compliance, and the model generalizes from it to the case your rule never quite covered. Even this rule book runs out somewhere, and it runs out exactly at the hard calls. So the criteria sheet cracks on two cases, the finding that's true but not worth posting, and the bug that looks like the local convention. Here, the guide is unusually blunt. When detailed instructions still give inconsistent output, few short examples are the most effective technique. Each example is aimed at a boundary, a case where two answers were both plausible, and it shows the reasoning that picked the winner. The cards also carry the output shape, location issue, severity, and suggested fix, so the format gets demonstrated instead of described. The strongest pairs put an acceptable pattern right beside a genuine issue that looks almost identical to it. And it's no lookup table. The guide's own wording says examples let the model generalize judgment to patterns you never spelled out. So you write one example per boundary, not one per rule, wrap each in example tags, and keep the set relevant and genuinely varied. Here is the whole method. Set the way you'll use it, write the boundary down, then show it the hard calls. All that's left is where the words live, and placement decides what every single review costs. The rulebook's written now, so it needs a home, and everything that's true on the first turn of every review goes in the system prompt. The turn underneath holds one thing, the diff you want reviewed. If a rule only matters later, a mid-conversation system message carries it with the same authority. Inside the turn, the long material sits near the top and the ask goes last, so the diff comes first and the instruction lands freshest. And every block gets its own tag, so instructions, criteria, examples, and the diff can't bleed into one another. There's a cost reason too. The cached prefix builds in order, tools, then system, then messages, and a change invalidates everything after it. Put the pull request number at the top of the system block, and you pay full price again for every stable word underneath it. The prompt is rebuilt, so let's watch the exam ask about all of this at once. Time to sit one, a published sample straight from the guide, the actual item, not my imitation of one. A support agent resolves barely half of its contacts on the first touch, well short of its target. The way it misses is the tell. It escalates easy cases with photo evidence and tries to handle the policy exceptions itself. So the boundary between resolve and escalate lies in somebody's head, and nobody wrote it down for the agent. Name the question first. The agent holds the case and picks the wrong action. So this is a how is intent carried question. Then check for an absolute, a must, or a never. There isn't one. The stem only asks for the most effective way to improve escalation calibration. No absolute means guidance is legal, and in this domain guidance usually wins, the exact opposite of the last few episodes. Option B has the agent score its own confidence and wrote the low scores to a human, which is the same idea that already failed on the reviewer. A self-reported score is poorly calibrated, and this agent is already confidently wrong on the hard cases, so B filters with the broken part. Option C trains a separate classifier on historical tickets, labeled data, and a second model bought before the cheap prompt change has even been tried. Option D escalates on customer sentiment, which is a different problem. An angry customer with a simple return is still a simple return, which leaves a explicit escalation criteria in the system prompt with few short examples showing when to escalate and when to resolve. A wins because it names the root cause, an unwritten decision boundary, and the explanation calls it the proportionate first response. Look at what a really is, our line in exam clothes. Write the boundary down, then show it the hard calls. One twist before we leave it. Make the stem say the agent must never resolve a policy exception, and it dies on the spot. Never is a promise a prompt cannot make. So the moment an absolute enters the stem, only a mechanism can answer. Look at where the reviewer stands tonight. A report list and a skip list, a snippet on every severity level, and examples for the hard calls. Its worst category is still off on purpose, and Marco has taken the filter off his inbox. One line to walk out with for any system where the output is wrong and the instructions look right. Write the boundary down, then show it the hard calls. If nobody has done either, you don't have a model problem, you have a prompt that never decided anything. Next time the reviewer writes its clearest report yet, and Nadia's merge gate can't read a word of it because the gate doesn't speak prose.